I'm going to work on an Imperial Knight's army, but I want every big knight, and most of the little ones, to represent something from Warhammer Fantasy, the Empire of Warhammer Fantasy, now called the Old World, because I love the lore and everything, the vibe that comes with that. And so this time I'm going to kitbash this big guy into a Knight Flagellant. But I also want some more dynamic poses. So the first thing I did was just snap these legs in half. They're attached like this on the sprue. You can just break them, and now I have an articulating knee joint, so I can make much more dynamic poses. But I'm gonna glue the legs, the ankles in place to make sure that at least I have a stable base and I don't have too few attachment points for all this weight of the knight to lean on. And it also gives me the opportunity to give him a little ledge to stand on, and that will immediately give him a much more dynamic pose than if his legs are just on the ground. It'll make him look a little less heavy, maybe a little less solid, because what is a big heavy robot doing standing in a nice combat pose? But it does give me the opportunity to have this big open space here on the base, and I need that for his melee weapon. But before we get to the weapons, let's talk about where the whole idea comes from. So the flagellants, I love them. They are crazed lunatics who think the end of the world is coming. That's why they charge into battle, because what else is there to do when the end of the world is nigh? But knights, they're more about honor and dishonor. So I figured, what if a knight dishonors himself so much that he can only really find redemption in death? Not just the pilot, but the robot, the knight himself as well. And if he's going into death like that, then I can also add a little bit of Slayer vibes, the dwarf slayers. So what if a knight would go into battle seeking death without any of the armor plating on? So I think I got his pose right. He's nice and menacing, looking in one direction, and I got plenty of space over here, like I said, for his melee weapon. But I'm first gonna work on his ranged weapon. And the flagellants, they don't have any ranged weapons, but there's plenty of crazed zealots in 40k as well, and they generally use flamers. So I think I can take this barrel from the cannon and the tip of the melta and give him a nice massive flamer. I've just got a saw through here, and then I'm just gonna use my clippers to get rid of this lower barrel. As long as I don't damage the top barrel, I'm gonna be okay, because that's all I really want. And I wanna have this cover here, this whole part. So I'm just gonna have to clip and file and saw the bottom part away until that's the only part left. Yeah, perfect. That looks like a flamer barrel, doesn't it? It just has this massive opening underneath there. I think I'm just gonna stuff that with a lot of green stuff and then hide it with whatever decoration I can find. But if I stick it in here, now I can work on this sort of fuel line that goes underneath it that's supposed to hold the igniter. And I'm gonna use this piece. That comes from the knight's legs. It's supposed to go from the hip to the upper leg, and I think I can just stick it underneath here and it will look a little bit like an ignition system for this flamer. And for that igniter fuel line, that ignition system, I'm just going to use this 2mm wire from Green Stuff World, and I can poke it in here. In that shield there's the space for a stubber or something like that, and just, I don't know, leave quite a bit over here so I can have a nice line hanging there, and then sort of the length of the barrel plus a little bit so I can have it hanging in nice loops. And this line needs to be attached to the barrel in some way, but I'm not going for a nice and neat and properly maintained system here. I'm just going to use some chain, because I think that if a knight is sent to its death, it's not being maintained properly anymore. It's just kind of let go. And so I can continue with this loop of chain here around the barrel and sort of loop it around that fuel line, that ignition line, and bend it so that it looks like it's hanging down. Now that's a flamer. It looks good, it's massive, it's good for burning the heretics. So let's see how this looks when he is in position. There, I think this looks pretty cool. He's kind of menacing, standing there with his flamer, looking across over it. I like how he's standing, but like I said, this space over here, that's for the melee weapon. Now, what melee weapons do zealots usually come with? Flails. Well, at least the flagellants, they have mainly flails. I could give him a pitchfork or something like that, but I think a flail is better. And I'm taking a bit of inspiration here from Trench Crusade. They have this knight with the trench pilgrims who has a shield in the form of a wheel, and zealots come from far and wide to have themselves broken onto that shield to go into battle with that knight and to sort of die heroic, well, not really heroic, but die a sacrificial death in battle. And so if this knight is sent into battle as well, he has disgraced himself, there might be some zealots hanging around who take the opportunity to go into battle with him. But what's better than being strapped to a shield? It's being strapped to a weapon, or in this case, the head of the flail. Because then you're guaranteed to at least die in battle. Even if the knight doesn't go down, if he uses you to smash the heretics with, you're gonna get your wish. So I want to have this lying here on the ground and then attach it with a chain to that left arm of my knight. And for the chain, I got this. This is a tiny chainsaw chain. The only issue is I can move it like this however I want, but it doesn't really twist and turn. And I need to break it open. But I think it would just be really cool to have a chainsaw chain on my actual knight. I just gotta see if I can make this work. Now I'm trying to figure out how I can pose this properly. See, everything needs to stay on the base. And even though I left a lot of space here, I still get the idea that it would look much cooler if this thing is sort of dragged behind him, kind of like that. But I can't get a bigger base. But I was thinking, what if I swap the arms around? And yeah, it's sad, but it means that this beautiful detail on my massive flamethrower is going to be on the inside of the knight and not on the outside, so it's not going to be so visible. But at least I can have this chain lying like this. Just get it into the poster body and have it sort of trailing here in front of him. And I think this might be a better composition. And I still get to say that I actually use a chain sword chain on my miniatures. Now before I can continue with the kitbash, I have to do a little bit of painting. So I've dry brushed all of his frame with some iron warriors and then silver, just to give it some metallic shine and a little bit of a highlight. But I also want to paint this top part. This cover is pretty much the only armor that he's gonna have, because I think it's essential, right? I can't really do anything with that. So that's the part of armor that he has. And so it should still have his colors, his house's colors. And I'm going again with Empire colors, so pretty much white and red. But I'm going for a bit more of a bone color. I think it will look better, especially after I grime it up. It just looks a little nicer than white. Although I'll sprinkle in a little bit of white here and there for the highlights. So everything here is rock art fresh flesh, and then this is ivory tusk from Tooth in Coats. And then some Mephiston red on the other side. And I'm working rough here. I don't mind if it looks like it's stippled on. I want it to look rough anyway, because like I said, this knight is not going to be maintained very well if he's already sent to its death. So the paint scheme, or the paint on the knight, is not going to look so pristine either. And for a bit of variety in the red, I'll stipple on some demon red. Time for a bit of rust, and I'm gonna keep it fairly light because I don't want to make a knight that's completely rusted through. This isn't Chaos Knights after all. But I am going to rust out all the parts of a knight that could rust and that they don't really want to replace, such as, for example, these vents and pipes and the exhausts. A bit of rust chipping on the edges of the armor, and some dirty down rust for some more color. And that's some pretty good rust effects right there. I also did a little bit of streaks, so rust streaks from Make It Interactive to make it look even older. And now it looks all rusty, but another good way to show wear and tear and that the knight is not being maintained properly is of course leaks. So I've got here engine oil, I got fuel stains and Ichor of the Damned. 3 very glossy enamels, and they all have slightly different colors, but they all kind of achieve the same thing. So I'm just gonna go over these pistons, for example. They must be lubricated, which is a good thing, but also here where there's these hoses attaching to the frame, I'm gonna add some engine oil over here, and I'll go over it with all the other enamels that I have to make it look like it's leaking, like there's stuff coming out, and it's just not in a good state. There you go. See, now there's stuff leaking from here, all these hoses, some fuel here on the fuel line as well. It's all just to show that this thing is not being maintained properly anymore. It's going towards its death. There's nobody paying attention to how well it's doing. I don't know if you've ever seen this really cool art installation of a hydraulic machine that just tries to sweep hydraulic fluid into itself again. That's kind of the feeling I get here. Now we're getting to the point where I am going to have to glue everything together, like so, because it's time for the second part of this kitbash. See, the flagellants, they are naked, but they have some rags hanging off them, and that is kind of what I want to do with this knight as well. So I need to get him a nice bit of cloth, cheesecloth to be precise. So I'm just gonna cut this into pretty thin strips. Then I'm just gonna fray the edges by pulling out little bits and pieces of here, because I want to make this look like this too is old and decrepit. And just for the clarity, this is double layer of cheesecloth, so not a single layer, because I think single layer is great for regular minis or making nets, but for cloth, for a knight like this, I want double layers. And I am gonna see how I can drape this over him to make him kind of look like one of these flagellants. Like they have this sort of I don't know, top part that shows chest and arms naked, which is of course great for the knight's weapons, and then a sort of skirt, but I'm not really going to make a skirt because I think it would obscure too much of the knight. I'm just going to give him lots of, I don't know, strips of cloth hanging down in the center and around the sides and make the legs stick out. But I need to paint the cloth before I put it onto the guy, so this is going to take some time. I just have to cut a lot of strips, spray it, prime it, paint it, grime it up, and then glue it onto the knight. And I don't know how I'm going to do that, but we'll see. Right, so these pieces of cloth, I blasted them with a sort of reddish brown and then a bone color over it to make it look nice and sort of worn out, like the cloth, the color is already out of the cloth, and I managed to get some of it back onto the knight. And I'm quite happy with this. His backside is showing, that's fine. And now it's time for the shoulders, and I'm going to do the same. I got this little cup over here with some watered down PVA glue, and that is so that I can squish the cloth easier together and also of course glue it to the frame, because otherwise this cloth is just going to hang loose. Now I'm going to see what I can do here, but I would just want to make it look like there's straps of cloth just hanging down. So I'm first going to put it all in there on top of the knight with a lot of this glue, like so. So I just put it on there, get this brush and sort of smush it in between the carapace and the shoulder joint, like that. Now, lots of PVA glue will make it stick, and then I can work this into whatever shape I want. So I got my scissors here, and I'm just gonna cut this into strips in anything, any shape that I think could work, and have it sort of drape over the gun, because I really want to show off this knight's arm that is here behind the cloth. I want this to stick out. I want this to really look like it's just rags that they hung on him, kind of as a way to shame the knight. Like, he doesn't have any armor anymore, he's just wearing rags now, because that's what you get when you dishonor yourself as a knight. I had to get different scissors because this one just wasn't cutting it. Now, time for some more glue. I'm just working this into the cloth here. I wanted to soak it up because it will also harden the cloth a little bit. Well, PVA glue kind of turns plastic, and it will make it easier for me to paint this afterwards, because I still want to dirty it a little bit, make it more grimy and nasty, of course, but also some of the fluids that come from the knight. I painted all those leaks on there. They will soak into the cloth as well. Same with rust. If you have something rusty and it's brushing up against cloth, the cloth will of course get some of that rust powder on it as well. And I want this to look really, really ragged. And I feel like the edges, like here, just aren't frayed enough. So I'm going to start pulling some of the threads loose, but I first want to shape it in place. And I think like this, I can kind of make it look like he's wearing an actual proper kind of robe, kind of like the flagellants have, like the skirt and then sort of body piece up on top of it. And like this, it almost looks like these pieces of cloth are connecting. At least this is on one side. Now it's time for the other side. I got a couple of these scraps left over that I just cut off, and I got a good idea for the shield. See, I think it would be cool if they covered up his shield to kind of identify the dishonored knight. To, he's not longer allowed to carry his own colors. He's still in the colors of his house. Okay, can't really get rid of that because maybe he also shamed his house. But I think he ashamed himself so much that he shouldn't be allowed to display his own shield anymore. So I'm just going to glue the shield in place, and then I'll wrap this piece of cloth around it. So it goes over the top, and I just have to stick it behind there and here across the bottom, and really make it look like somebody tied it on there. So I'm gonna put some barbed wire or something on there to really show that, yeah, they want to cover his own colors, his own symbols, his own identity. Like, this is a disgraced and dishonored knight. He's no longer an honorable knight, actually. He's just nothing, and he is there to die, and that's why he's not allowed to show his own colors anymore. I think that's a pretty grimdark nastiness. There, I think that's pretty brutal. It really looks like some nasty rags have been draped all around him. I still want to paint these rags, sort of grime them up, make them look even dirtier, but also I think a little bit darker or much lighter. I'm not 100% sure what to do. I want to have this very dark frame and a sort of lighter cloth that looks really dirty and nasty. I'm just gonna wait until the PVA is dried and then I'll figure it out. In the meantime, I got his little buddy over here and I've already done some work. I painted him in the same paint scheme as him, of course, to show that they're in the same faction. This is not some prisoner that's being tortured or whatever. No, this is a guy from his own side that voluntarily said, tie me up, I'm going to go into battle with this knight that is looking for death. And here I got a little cup of some Carrion Crimson from Villainy Inks, and this is fantastic for coagulated blood, because he's not the first one to have himself strapped in there. So all around him I'm going to add a nasty layer of this gory Carrion Crimson, because I think you can guess what happens when he takes a swing with this and connects with an enemy. And a bit of Ichor of the Damned in there to darken it while keeping it glossy. Now we got a nice little gory scene here. Now the dude himself, of course, isn't bleeding yet, because, you know, he's still fresh. Otherwise I would have to put some broken, mangled corpse on here, and this looks cooler. But I think like this, I've got a nice sort of story in one piece of the miniature. And it's time for me to start working on the base. And my knights, they're going to be in the forest, because that's what knights do. They go to the darkest part of the forest where they find the monsters for them to fight. And a Dishonored knight like this, especially to redeem himself, is going to look for the worst monsters he can find. But I also want to make this sort of a reference to the old world fantasy Warhammer, you know. They have lots of forest in the old empire, lots of beasts and monsters and chaos in there. So that's what I want to make as well. But I don't just want to make it a deserted forest where you don't find anything else but trees. No, I want civilization that has been pushed back by the forest, and now the knights are coming here to reclaim it again for humanity. So I got some ruined blocks over there. I'm gonna make a little cobble path. I guess it's obvious that I got one of those hot wire cutters for this foam recently, because I did this as well with my Night Lords Abaddon. It's really fun to get one of those things and make cool things with it. And I've painted most of the base now. I got the rocks, the cobblestone path, a piece of a building. I got some cloth in the same colors as the knight and his little buddy, so red and white, to show that this was their territory at one point. There's some bits and pieces, some armor, a sword, a shield, skulls in weird configurations. You know, this is not how skulls come together. Something or somebody made the effort to put all the skulls there or put heads there. Same on that side. And then a nice tree branch. I just got some roots from the forest behind my house, some cobbles, some stones, some bits and pieces. Now it's time for some foliage, and I'm going to start with some spiky brown and spiky green from Gamer's Grass, because they're thorns, and I like adding thorns to this base because it gives this idea that you're in a hostile environment. Now, I like adding a little bit of super glue to the bottom just to make sure it sticks in place on top of this. And I'm going to find places where seeds of this grass or of these thorns could get together and start to grow. So over here, along the branch, along the stones, and I'm going to try and leave a little bit of an open path to, I don't know, simulate that there's been some compression of the ground over there and there's just not much growing. And of course, I want to add some regular grass as well. And I'm going to add some of it here to the cobblestone path to show that it's getting a little bit overgrown. And I got Swamp XL, and I think this is Marshland set. It's just all kinds of fairly dark, desaturated greens that work perfectly on this forest base. Now, those grasses are always a little bit shiny. That just can't be helped, no matter how good they are. So a little bit of a streaking grime wash will help to knock the shine off. And then I think I need to add a little bit more color again in the form of little forest flowers. These are from Geek Gaming Scenics and Gamer's Grass. They're both fairly purple, but a slightly different tint. So it looks good if I put multiple of these together, so it's not all the exact same flower. And then finally, some leaf litter. I got green, yellow, and orange, all from Green Stuff World. I got big and small as well. And I've never used this before, so let's just see if I can make this work. I guess a little bit of PVA in the right spot, and you can add some nice leaves lying in different places. And I think that will really finish this base. And for those finishing touches, I've got some chain here and I don't know, something that could function as relics or something. The zealots, they carry quite a lot of symbols of Sigmar, hourglasses and other bits and pieces into combat, and I wouldn't mind having a little of that on this knight, but I don't know if it's a good idea. But I definitely want more chains, because like this, it's clear that somebody's really strapped that cloth onto his shield. He brought dishonor on himself, his house, and his cow, And now I want to show that they did the same with the cloth. Like they tied it onto him. It's a symbol of shame that he has this on. No, they're not relics. These are just old cogs that they have hung on this knight. And you can imagine with every step he takes, those cogs slam against his frame. So he makes a lot of noise when he's moving. And I think that's pretty cool because it shows again his shame. He can't hide it. Everybody will hear him coming and they will know why he's bound up like this, why he has those cogs hanging off him. This is a dishonored knight who can't escape his shame. And I'm going to add a little bit more details to the cloth now. First, this one that goes over his shield, that I want to have painted black, kind of like a mourning shroud over his own arms. And if that piece of cloth is black, then I want to differentiate it even more from the rest of the cloth, so I'll just dry brush that with some rock art flesh to lighten it. Of course, this then needs some grime in the form of streaking grime, because that's slightly greener than Goon's grime, which I like to use now a lot, and that will fit the forest base, of course. With the chains rusted and those cogs as well, it's time to put him on his base, attach the flail, and then my Knight Flagellant looks like this. And I'm in love. Man, it worked out really well. This is a dishonored knight. His armor has been stripped away, his collars are hidden with a black cloth, and he is chained with cogs that clang against his frame with every step he takes, so he can't hide his shame. And now he's looking for redemption in death. I really like the red and white color scheme for the knight. It references the old world perfectly, and it just looks good on Imperial Knights. I'm going to use this on all the other Imperial Knights I'm making as well, because I think it stands out very well on the tabletop and it contrasts well with the forest base. Now the weapons, they're great fun to kitbash. The flamer, it's surprisingly simple. I don't really know why I don't see this more often. Of course, you gotta cut up your melta and your cannon, and lots of people want to magnetize their knights. Where I play, it doesn't really matter what weapons are on knights. If you just say this is a big melta or this is a big cannon, people go, sure, don't care. Now the flail, I'm really happy with how that turned out. I love the fact that I now have the chain of an actual chainsaw on one of my miniatures. That in itself is already really cool. But the flail head really makes things brutal and grimdark. I love the little reference to Trench Crusade. And I love the little dude that's just hanging there, getting ready to get smashed to bits whenever the knight swings that flail. The forest base was really fun to do as well. I really enjoyed spending time putting those leaves in place, but also the little stories that you can tell with the base. The pile of skulls here, the ram's head, the beastman head over there. And if he didn't have this pose, I could put some more figures on the base with him. But I also quite like that this knight is standing alone and he doesn't have little soldiers coming along with him in battle because he's dishonored. Who would want to walk next to a dishonored knight? That's not something you do. Although a little zealot could go on there. I think I should kitbash one or two of the little knights to go along with him. Maybe they clang their bells and shout shame while this knight goes into battle, or maybe they're there to strap another zealot to the flail head when this guy inevitably perishes. I really enjoyed making this kitbash. Share this video with your friends if you want to help the channel grow. Join the Discord. There's lots of people in there showing off their kitbashes, and you can show off yours as well, and you get to see lots of work in progress pics from me. And if you want to support the channel financially, there's a Patreon and there's affiliate links to a bunch of stuff in the description below. You can use that to get your chain, your barbed wire and bits and pieces from Green Stuff World. I'm going to work on another knight, and I'm going to need some suggestions from you guys on what you would like to see next. A witch hunter knight, or a war priest of Sigmar knight, or maybe something else. You have a specific character in mind or a specific unit you want to see. Let me know in the comments below. And in the meantime, check out this video next.